Welcome to my humble little office. My name is R. Keith Andrews. I am a spiritual guide and paranormal adept. Well, the journey continues today. It is March 18th at roughly 4:48 a.m. PST. I've been doing a lot of thinking over the last little while. And the big thing that has come to my attention is this. I've spent my entire life trying to figure out how to fit into this world, how to fit in on this planet. Now, I'm sure many of you have asked the same question. Where do I fit? Where do I belong? What should I be doing? Now, I know this is going to upset some of you, especially if your kids get a hold of it. Okay, and here it is. I was told growing up, and I wholeheartedly believed it, that you have to have your life in order. You've got to have a plan in place by the time you're 20 in order to succeed. Well, sad reality of it is this. I've been working in the field of consulting, of psychic consulting, of business consulting, personal consulting since I was 10. Okay, and something very important has come to my attention. The greater majority, and we mean the massive majority of people, do not know what they desire to do when they grow up until they're in their late 40s, early 50s. There's a whole lot of there's a whole lot of things that happen in the middle of that. But the critical factor is trying to figure out where you fit in the world. And the real kicker to it is this. You don't have to fit in the world. You have to fit in this world. And I don't mean you have to fit where I stay. You have to fit where you feel comfortable. Now, this includes everything you've gone through in life, no matter how twisted your memories may be, no matter what kind of a life you may have led, where you may have come from. Remember, where you are today is the result of all of the myriad choices you've made over your life. Okay, now, the intriguing part of it is this. When you start looking at perception of yourself, perception of other people is easy. You may take a look at somebody you see and go, I'm not impressed with the way they look. Like, I mean, let's face it. You look at me, I am not what we call a polished individual. I mean, heck, even with my boots, they aren't exactly what we call polished. They're functional, they work, they do the job, and that is the critical factor from my perspective. Many people will take a look at their shoes and go, they're not absolutely buffed properly, they don't have a shine on them, therefore they are lower class. Well, I've been called a lot of things, and high class has never been one of them. Okay, although I did ask somebody one day why every time I turn around, it seems people are asking me for money. Okay, and I don't mean the ones that I owe money to, but I mean just strangers, right? And I asked him, I says, I am not, it's not like I am made of money here. Why is it people do that? And he looks at me and he goes, well, he says, you act as though you own the place. When you walk into a place, you act as though you belong there. Which is an intriguing comment when you find out that that's literally what it boils down to. What I came to understand is this. If I'm not happy here, if I'm not set right where I feel comfortable, I'm not going to fit anywhere. It won't matter how much other people tell me I'm doing a good job, I'm sitting in the right place. I actually lost the option of a job one day for telling the boss the during an interview. I told the boss flat out what they thought of my work was absolutely irrelevant if I wasn't happy with it. For some reason, they didn't like that answer and ended up not hiring me, which is okay. In my opinion, far better to not get hired than to get fired. Easier on the ego. So, here's what I came to understand. With all the different views that I've got, with all the different outlooks on life that I've got, I had to realize that all of those belief structures are exactly what brought me to where I am. The reason I got bullied was because I didn't do things the way everybody was expecting me to. I had a phenomenal family where it came to the backup. In other words, when I ran into problems, no matter what was going on at home, my family, my brothers, my sister, my parents would jump right in and make sure I didn't run into a problem. Now, there's no real functional way I can repay that, in my opinion, aside from pass on the idea to you. Okay, and hopefully help you understand that first and foremost, I love the one thing my father told me, right? And what he told me, because I refused to fight when I was a kid. Okay, my brother's not so much so, but I did. And my father used to tell me all the time, it takes a far bigger man to walk away from a fight than it does to swing the first punch. Well, I'll tell you, I grew up believing that wholeheartedly, and I still do not like fighting. If I get pushed to a certain level, my temper goes, but that tends to be verbal. Okay. It was funny when I looked at going into the military, and I've got a great deal of respect for the people that join the military. Okay, the purpose behind it, the whole 9 yards. But the military had this brilliant idea. Because I was diagnosed epileptic, they would not let me into the military. Something to do with automatic weapons and epileptic seizures. Okay, which, realistically is understandable. Now, what I came to understand is this. You'll notice that shelf behind me is actually coming, the garbage on it and the junk on it is going away. And no, it's not just being moved elsewhere. It's literally going where it belongs. It either goes into a proper file or it went into the garbage, depending. And that's what this funny little bucket here is for. That's for all the paper that gets torn up and gets thrown out. Yeah, I know, you didn't even see that. But look at the bright side, it's recycling. Wasn't the garbage can I picked up. Okay, again, everything has a place. The hard part for me was figuring out the place that I had was actually right here. It's not that what other people think of me doesn't matter. In all fairness, it matters a great deal, especially if you're trying to interact with society. Now, I solved that problem a lot. I became very reclusive. Not a good path. I mean, it worked great for me, but it may not be the best path for you. So I came to the conclusion that it was time to really change the way I was doing things, to really look at life and go, okay, I've got all this knowledge that people are telling me answers, all kinds of questions for them. The little booklet that I wrote, Believe in Yourself and Follow Your Dreams. I was told by a lot of people that have looked at it, that have purchased it, that have read it, that it's very simplistic, yes, but it helps make the rest of them, of the other books that are, of the other great self-help books that are out there, it makes them make a little bit more sense. Okay, now it really is time that I start following some of what I've been telling people. Now, I do my best, in all fairness. When I meet people, I do my best to smile at them. I do my best to, to say hello. I mean, I'm not perfect by any stretch, and if you're hoping I'm perfect, you might want to hope for something else, like maybe the sun rising in the west. You'll have better luck. Okay. Now, the nice part about it is once you get your mind set on where you're standing and you realize that whatever you're feeling here, whatever you're thinking here, that is part of what makes you you. And the trick is to get this and this in balance. Okay. And I asked one of my mentors, what do you do when your heart and your head are in conflict? Right? As in, when your heart wants to go one direction, your head says, no, we gotta go that way. I asked him, how, pray tell, do you handle that? And he busts out laughing. He looks at me and he goes, well, that's easy. He says, follow your heart, but use your head to get there. Okay. In other words, don't go running off to do something just because, you've got this impulse to do it. When you look at impulse, you hand that off. You can hand that off to all sorts of things. Things like, impulse buying, impulse gambling, impulse drinking. Okay, impulse speaking. Lord knows I put my foot in my mouth. And, the nice part there is I never question, am I going to put my foot in my mouth? It's a question of how am I going to get the other one in there beside it? I did it again. I do hope we get a thumbs up out of that. We get a thumbs up on the video. Okay, subscribe to our channel. There's a lot of information coming out. And, we would like to pass this on to everybody. Quite frankly, our goal is simple. Help people understand that everybody out there, no matter what walk of life you come from, no matter your religious affiliation, your political alignment, your orientation, your gender, your color, it doesn't even matter your species. Okay, turns out race, there are multiple human races, but there's only one human species. And it's the species that really makes the difference. Okay, now, people worry about things like this one world government. But my understanding of most of the complaints is real simple. Most people seem to equate one world government with dictatorship, and they are not the same thing. A one world government really, from my understanding, boils down to one species, one civilization, working together to one planetary outcome. Okay, this does not mean that the people in the south, the people down in the desert lands, or let's go further south, people in the rainforest are not going to know how to handle society, how to handle the living conditions in the far north, or vice versa. The people living in the desert, okay, are not going to be able to comprehend life on an archipelago. In other words, a series of islands with water all over the place. They're just not going to wrap their brain around it because they've got no functional experience with it. Well, I came to the understanding myself that I had to take my look, my absolute, and boy, my absolute, what's the word I'm looking for? Told you I wasn't perfect. My absolute dislike of conflict. My look at the wars that are going on and going, people, what are you fighting for? You're fighting for material stuff. But the reality is, I had to look at it and go, okay, I don't like fighting, period. Okay. I personally, now I'm listed in, like, I work in a field of the psychic work. I've always disliked the term psychic. I like the way it was termed to me sensitive. Now, a sensitive is somebody that picks up or senses other energies. Okay, senses things that are happening. Now, I had to take that, my understanding of the universe from the standpoint of other races, how that can be translated from the look of other races to how humans, especially centuries back, and honestly, people today have the same problem. When you take a look at people that are more advanced, that more advanced culture, that more advanced society can seem like gods. The trick is not to look at yourself as a god. Okay. And this is why I go, I am not perfect. I've been told, people have said, oh, you're an expert you're an expert in alien technology. Well, my immediate response is no. Specialist, certainly. Okay. An adept in certain fields, certainly, meaning I've got a wide array of information. Okay, wider than many, but not as wide as some. Okay, so I had to look at that. I had to look at my journey through religion, through spirituality, and go, how does this all fit together to make me what I am right now. And am I comfortable with that? Well, the answer to that is, for the most part, now, yes. Okay, I have suffered from nightmares for my entire life. Okay, it's a very strange feeling this morning. I woke up for the second day in a row. I hadn't had a nightmare. You know, you'd almost gonna be sitting there going, well, what's wrong with me? Why am I not having nightmares? But I'll tell you, I feel a heck of a sight better waking up that way. It's kind of like if you drink a lot and you wake up in the morning and you're having a hangover every time you wake up, and you finally get around to quitting drinking, you wake up going, I don't have a hangover. Where'd that headache go that I used to have all the time? Okay. You know, it's a wonderful thing to actually have the lights come on. Yeah, I've been living in the dark for a very long time, and what I've come to understand is this. I am no longer interested in living in my past. My past has been looking in the mirror going, you know, and understand, I was never called this. I was called strange. I was called weird. I was called odd. I was called, you know, such neat little cliche things like four eyes. You know, oddly enough, these really don't work that well. Okay, I was called a lot of things, but what I was never called, and yet always saw myself as, was I was never called a freak. At least not that I recall. Okay, so with that in mind, I used to see that as a really bad thing. And then one day it was pointed out to me that the platypus is also a freak of nature. It doesn't have a parallel, and there's no functional way to put it together. It's like, how pray tell did that mess of different traits end up in one body? Well, thankfully, I only ended up with one set of traits in the body. The mind, on the other hand, was a whole different ballgame. So I spent a lot of years talking to counselors, psychiatrists, psychologists, you know, amateurs and professionals alike, and I always asked them the same question. How can I tell if I'm losing my mind? How do I know I'm not nuts? And without exception, they have told me the same thing. The fact that you're asking if you're nuts tells you you're not. So we went, well, how's that? And they simply said, look, if you're going nuts, you're not going to know it. You're just not going to know it, so you won't even think to ask if there's a problem. The people around you will ask, but you certainly won't. Okay, I do know that I do not see things in the same way that other people do. But the fact that I have come to that understanding, and that was only, if you look at the time frames, that was only 2 nights ago. Came to that conclusion a couple of days ago, and all of a sudden, I'm not having nightmares. Now, is there a correlation? Obviously, there's a correlation, but exactly what that correlation is at this point, I'm not 100% certain. Okay, it's time to look in the mirror and realize that whatever you've gone through in life, whether you have, like me, never been in jail, I've never had a speeding ticket, this does not make me better than you. Okay, oddly enough, I learned a couple of things. My whole method of learning to socialize was done around the gaming table. I could not communicate with people at all, or more to the point, I would not, until I was introduced to something called Dungeons and Dragons, the old tabletop version, not the computerized versions, tabletop, where people gathered around a table using dice, using their imagination to build characters. It was likened to me one day by an actual psychologist that sat in on the game. And what she said is it kind of reminded her of the old campfire stories, where everybody sat around the campfire, somebody would tell a story, and you sit there and you'd listen, you'd get involved in the story. The thing with gaming is, she says, the main person, the game master, sits there and talks and lays out the story for the world, and then each of the other people around the table, build one character, and they work with that character and add their input to that story. That was how I learned to communicate. That was the only place I could communicate, was around the gaming table. In that little isolated world that everybody else was saying was absolutely bizarre. But the way I learned how to communicate with the physical, like with physical people, anybody out there, yourself, whether you're a pauper or a multimillionaire, I see you the same way. Okay, the guy that taught me how to do that was an ex-arm breaker for a bike gang. Okay, and again, I mean, people look at many of these side societies, these smaller pockets of society, and they go, they're terrible people. Well, they have their own rules, absolutely. But here's the funny thing with society. If you build a set of laws for society and they do not apply to everybody in the same way, that society will fracture and become a smaller society unto itself. Now, if that smaller society does not have equal laws for everybody, it too will fracture. What we have today is a world that is riddled with inequality. Okay, and it's riddled across the board by skin color, by orientation, by gender, by height. I mean, the reality is certain things in society are, because the greater majority of people, for instance, are right-handed. Society on the whole is built for right-handed people. Okay, it stands to reason. But there are little pockets of society that have gone, oh, look, left-handed people also do things differently. So let's build some of the tools that are traditionally right-handed. Let's swap them over and make another rendition, maybe not as wide a variety, but at least something that is left-handed. So it's a little more comfortable for left-handed people. Primary example of that, for instance, is scissors. Okay, scissors are built for right-handed people. But some people have developed left-handed scissors. Some people have changed, the engineers have done a fabulous job in changing the grip so that a right or left hand can hold on to it. Okay, even with cars, you can get things built differently. But what I found was, as soon as I realized that everything that I saw in this world was of value, was part of what makes me me, all of a sudden the nightmares are going away. I'm resting better. I'm sleeping more effectively. I mean, I always did sleep laying down. Well, that's not true. I can actually sleep standing up. Found that out the hard way. That was funny. But as soon as you realize that you yourself are complete as is, once you figure that out, that's when everything will start to make sense. Now, as you can see, like I said, I'm getting my head straight now, and now all this stuff is going away. Yes, I've still got work to do. It's not supposed to go away overnight. Okay, it would be nice if some of it, like for instance, if my own insecurities would go away, that'd be great. The odds of that happening like that are pretty limited. Okay, so when we take a look at that, okay, we come back to that neat little thing called success. And the biggest obstacle anybody has in life, the number one dominant problem, is their view of themselves. Okay, now it's amazing. I can point out all sorts of hiccups, all sorts of things that professionals are overlooking. I am not perfect. Okay, and that is the first thing that you have to realize. I keep saying this is the first thing. You notice there's a lot of things that are extremely important. You have to realize as an individual, regardless of your education, regardless of your societal standing in life, number one, you're not perfect. I know it's a terrible thing to say, and there's people out there, but the world revolves around me. Well, no, it doesn't. It revolves around the sun, and the sun revolves around something, and the something revolves around something. There's always something else out there. There's always something bigger. Hate that. Trying to sneeze. And it doesn't want to work. Watch this, it'll happen anyway. But that's why I tell people this is a live recording. I don't go back and edit. Okay, I just refuse to. I figure what you see is what you get. Okay, as soon as you come to the realization that number one, you're not perfect, and number two, everything you see in life is part of the whole you. It's part of what makes you you. Now, I was talking to somebody the other day. Okay, many people have mental misfires in their own right. And usually what happens is I ignore the misfires and just go, okay, that's just another person. Until such time as they come to me going, I don't like the way my life is going. I don't like the fact that I can't keep things straight. So how do I straighten it out? Well, years ago, a friend of mine told me flat out, I had a rather unique gift. I was able to help people change things and do things that I can't personally do. Prime example with my son. Okay, I've taught him to do things that I personally can't do by explaining what he needed to do. Okay, I mean, I was at one chap's place, and he was trying to get an engine in. Now, if I can find the oil cap on a car, I've done really well. This is why I tell people I'm mechanically inclined. Whenever I'm inclined, I call the mechanic. But I could see, because I can see the way the different energy patterns work, I could see where it had to go. I says, okay, push here, turn there, it'll fit. Well, he did what I said, and bang, it was in. Right. Now, there is not a snowball's prayer that I can actually do that myself. I know this for an absolute certainty because I can't hold the ratios together in my own head. But I'm going to bring this to a close here because we're hitting the half-hour mark. Okay, get things straight. Number one, you're not perfect. You're not the best. You're also not the worst. And that is okay because everything you are, everything you think, everything you do, everything you have done is all part of what makes you you today. And where we are standing today is it's time for every one of us, every entity on this planet, the planet included, to start working together to make this a better world for everybody. Now, for those of you that are seniors, you're coming to the end of your life, at least that's the theory. It's not about you. Okay. Even amongst the youngsters, they just have longer to live. It's not about the individual. I mean, it is from the standpoint of you have to live with yourself. You've got to be comfortable with you. But the real kicker is what are we leaving behind? Did your presence in this world make this a better place when you leave? That ultimately is what we as an entire species, as denizens of the same planet, that's what we are working towards. Okay, at least that's what we hope we're working towards, because this amount of war that's going on right now is absolutely misplaced. Now, I will be back again tomorrow, but until then, take care of yourselves and each other, and for pity's sake, stay positive.